Shavua Tov, Israel briefers from all around the world. I am Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief. If you are joining us for the first time, where we meet every Monday to Thursday to take a look at the top stories making headlines in Israel. The headlines that you will get here and probably not in the media in your countries. As always, the Israel Brief is brought to you in partnership with Lay of the Land. And we put out a weekly newsletter, so if you would like to receive that newsletter, please be in touch with us via our website. More details about that coming up a little later in the broadcast. Today is day 500. 500 days since the 7th of October. Today is day 500 since Hamas came through the barriers on the 7th of October, murdering over 1,200, committing acts of mass rape, mutilating, destroying whole families, and taking over 250 hostage, of which 73 still remain captive. Even though the passage of time has moved and hours have turned into days, days into weeks and into months and eventually into years, for us in Israel, it is still the 7th of October. We are unable to take that first step forward to healing for all of us until every single one of our hostages has returned home. The profound trauma suffered by the people of Israel on the 7th of October as Hamas fired thousands of missiles into our cities and committed atrocities, the stuff of which is our worst nightmares, is a large gaping wound, a trauma that we deal with every single day. I know many of you look at us and see a country that is resilient, that we are moving on with our lives, and two things can be true at once. We can be both resilient and broken-hearted. We can be both fighters and also people that are devastated and suffering major loss. In these past 500 days, it has also brought with it astronomical levels of anti-Semitism around the world. In countries like Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, and many others where we have always felt safe, where Jews have always felt a part of society, many are asking if there is a future that remains for them in those countries. I want to take this moment to thank so many of you out there who are not Jewish, who are standing so resolutely and unwaveringly with us, with your prayers, with your love, and with your support. For 500 days, we have been calling for the release of all of our hostages. We have been praying. We have been shouting. We now need to turn up the volume. There are still 73 that remain captive in the terror tunnels of Gaza. Not all of them are alive, but we want those that are still alive in the gravest of humanitarian conditions to be returned so that we can start their rehabilitation. And those that are no longer with us, we want to lay to rest in a dignified way. 500 days, and the healing hasn't even begun. So how is Israel marking 500 days? The Hostages and Missing Families Forum initiated a campaign of a 500-minute fast today in honor of all the hostages and to raise awareness. Hostage families and campaigners marched from Gaza Street in Jerusalem to the Knesset, calling for the remaining hostages to be brought home. In places like Kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the hardest hit kibbutzim, on the 7th of October, where over 100 of its residents were slaughtered, events were held there, both to remember the fallen or the murdered, and also to call for the return of hostages. Hostages whose names you might be familiar with from Kibbutz Be'eri include Eli Sharabi, who was released nearly 2 weeks ago. His wife Liane, daughters Noya and Yahel were murdered, along with the family dog on the 7th of October. He only found out about that when he was released. And his brother Yossi, also taken captive, was slaughtered in captivity. In other parts of the country, former hostages have met with officials. Today, Ohad Ben-Ami met with President Herzog and spoke a little bit about the conditions inside Gaza, telling the president that 6 of them were held in a 6-by-4-meter little space underground. He also said that when they did have access to media through however means, and they heard that people were marching, people were campaigning for them to be released, it gave them strength. So you know that your prayers and your voices help give our hostages, who might have that small chance of hearing it, it gives them the strength to survive. Over the weekend, the IDF Chief of Staff met 4 of the Tatzpitaniot, or observer soldiers, and spoke to them and heard from them how they felt, and apologized to them, asked their forgiveness for failing to take their warnings seriously. Now, to me, that is leadership. That is leadership when a leader, however painful it is, meets with those so badly affected. Israel's cabinet is meeting to discuss moving from phase 1 of the ceasefire deal to phase 2. And as President Trump's Middle East envoy has said, nobody will be left behind. Steve Witkoff, who was addressing the issue of hostages, reiterated no hostage will be left behind. On Saturday, 3 more hostages were released as part of phase 1. Now, of course, we were watching very carefully last week to see whether or not hostages would be in fact released. Now, President Trump last week said that if all the hostages weren't released by 12 on Saturday, then all hell will break loose. However, Israel was prepared to accept 3 hostages. Yair Horn, whose brother Eitan still remains hostage, taken from Kibbutz Nir Oz. Sasha Trufanov and Sagi Dekel-Chen, also taken from Kibbutz Nir Oz. Now, the 3 men were released on Saturday, of course, to the usual performance that Hamas put out. And Yair Horn was given a memento of an hourglass to give to Einav Sengokar. She has been one of the leading campaigners to free the hostages, and in particular her son Matan. And in a cruel, twisted propaganda move, the hourglass says time is running out, with a picture of Matan on it. The hostages were given mementos, and I saw on Talk TV some ludicrous woman saying that the hostages were given goodie bags. These are not goodie bags. This is a way to psychologically torment the hostages as they leave. The hostages were reunited with their families. And of course, we are starting to hear the horrific ordeal that they underwent. We heard that Sagi was interrogated, that his body bears the scars. Shortly before his release, a video with Sasha Trufanov that featured him looking like he was on vacation in the Gaza Strip was put out. His family said that the media did not have permission to share this kind of psychological trauma. But this is a situation that we find ourselves in still 500 days later. From the hostages that have been released, some of the families have been able to have signs of life of their loved ones. And earlier today, the family of hostage Nimrod Cohen said that they had received a sign of life by one of the hostages that was released on Saturday, that he was still alive but in dire condition. There is great fear for hostage Alon Ohel, who we know is being chained up inside one of the Hamas tunnels. He took shrapnel to the eye as he was trying to flee the Nova Festival on the 7th of October, and there are real fears that he may lose his eyesight. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel yesterday meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog, Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, and a host of other officials. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from the readout that the Secretary of State and Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday. The Secretary of State backed Trump's Gaza plan, calling it bold and the only viable path forward. Now, earlier today, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that neither Hamas or the Palestinian Authority would be permitted to govern Gaza. Continuing, Rubio said Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force, and Prime Minister Netanyahu took a similar stance on Hamas, saying that Israel will finish the job. He told American Jewish leaders, the courage of our soldiers and the decisions we made destroyed most of Hamas, and Israel will eliminate Hamas. Now, in the readout, he alluded to the gates of hell being open. This is what the president had said. And I'll read to you a little bit about what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. He said, we have a common strategy and we can't always share details of the strategy with the public, including when the gates of hell will be open, as they surely will if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them. And President Trump firmly suggested yesterday that the Prime Minister of Israel is in the driving seat on all decisions, saying that the Israeli Prime Minister can do what he wants. Meanwhile, Israel took delivery yesterday of a large shipment of weapons that was stalled under the previous administration. And finally, Fiji's Prime Minister has called a meeting, or will call a meeting with his cabinet this week to discuss the possibility of opening that country's embassy in Israel's capital, Jerusalem. If Fiji, which is a huge supporter of Israel, largely a Christian country, do move their embassy to Jerusalem, they will be the 7th country to have their embassy in the capital. So those are our top stories. Let's take a look at the audience question. And it comes from Hillary Gordon, who says, when South Africa took Israel to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, the judge said that the hostages must be released. What happened? Well, that is very important because the whole world focuses on the fact that the president of the court said that there is plausibility that genocide must be prevented. Now, the court did not say that genocide is occurring, that they just said that there is a plausibility for the fact that Palestinians must be protected, which Israel is doing. But they did give a definite ruling. They called for the immediate and unconditional release of all of the hostages, a fact which South Africa seems to have forgotten, as well as all the Hamas supporters parading in streets across the world. It is an absolute disgrace that this ruling of the court has not been enforced, but that the world has forgotten that out of all the rulings, that was the one that was definite, and choose to focus on allegations of genocide, which can be roundly disproven. So thank you, Hillary, for that. I have a question from Shirley earlier. I'm going to get to that tomorrow. But in the meantime, guys, don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook/Meta page is at Lottel's site. Please like, share, and follow. We are on YouTube right here at the Israel Brief. So if you like our content, please let's help our community grow, because when our community grows, access to news from Israel grows. We are on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks, on Instagram at Rolene_Marks. So guys, God bless you all. I will see you again tomorrow. Take care for now. Bye-bye.